Hi all, it's the 8th of September 2023 and we have not had one, but we have had two rapid intensifications of hurricanes. And both of them went to Category 5. Let's take a look at them. In the 24 hours leading up to 21 UTC on the 6th of September, Hurricane Jova rapidly intensified by 60 knots. And it continued to intensify until it became a Category 5. This intensification was clearly seen in the satellite-derived intensity product during this period, as we see the intensity estimates go from Category 1 all the way up to Category 5. Since then, the storm has weakened quite a lot as it has encountered cooler sea surface temperatures. Not to be outdone, over in the Atlantic, Hurricane Lee formed and the maximum winds increased by an incredible 70 knots in the 24 hours from 03 UTC 7th of September to 03 UTC 8th of September, and the minimum pressure had plummeted to 928 millibars. In the last video we were looking at the hurricane wharf and it did indicate that the storm would end up quite small to start with, and that's what happened. It was quite small with a 10 nautical mile wide eye and a 100 nautical mile wide radius of tropical storm force winds. Looking down from the GOES 16 view, you can really see the difference in the size of these storms, with Jova over here being a much larger circulation, weakening and the eye filling, whereas more intense Lee is over here as a smaller circulation. And now we've got tropical storm Margot, and Margot looks like it's going to go much more on a northward track. But looking closer at the storm, we can see that the storm has actually become recently more asymmetric, with much more convective banding on the eastern side of the storm. And this is occurring because there's actually a little bit of southwesterly shear impinging on the storm that's acting to focus the convection on that side. As a result, the intensity has dropped a dash, but it still remains a Category 5, and you can see it does have that small, almost pinhole-ish eye just tucked in there. And oh boy, well, you don't see that too often. You've got the full National Hurricane Center forecast has this as a major hurricane through the entire period of their diagram here, which goes out to 8 a.m. Wednesday. So this is going to be an extremely long-lasting major hurricane. And that's because the conditions are essentially remaining favorable throughout this whole area. No land interaction, the sea surface temperatures are very warm, and shear will continue to be lower. But towards the end there is supposed to be some shear impinging on it, and we'll take a look at that. Here is the latest run from the hurricane wharf, and there are a couple of things I want to note here. First of all, as we mentioned in the previous video, the storm was fairly small to start with, then growing in size. We're going to see that growth in size. There it's got a pretty tight circulation, and that's into Saturday. And then you see the area of hurricane force winds begin to expand. That's the area in the purples. That's all hurricane force sustained winds. You see it grow a little bit in size rather. And also the other thing is the hurricane wharf is producing a what are these called, mesovortices within a triangular shape. And well, it'll be pretty amazing if it does manage to predict that kind of structure, but that is something that you sometimes see in hurricanes, so we'll keep an eye out for something like that, or it could be some other kind of polygon within the eye. The good news is that in the near term, the hurricane is continuing on this track on a west-northwesterly trajectory, and that means that it will miss the Leeward Islands well to the north, and we'll look at the surf in a minute because it is going to be throwing huge waves at the islands. But beyond that, it actually passes to the north and then starts to turn to the north. So there is some hope in at least some of the models that this could actually miss the North American coastline. But not all the models are showing that. Some are showing landfall. I'll check them out in a second, but first let's take a look at the surf. The National Hurricane Center reported earlier that recent altimeter data showed a peak significant wave height in the storm of between 45 and 50 feet near the center. That's up to 15 meters high. And we can compare that with the European Center Medium Range Weather Forecasting model, wave model, and it doesn't get to those values, so it's probably slightly underestimating, but it's at 9.3 meters. I can't really get higher than that. But let's take a look as we go forward as to how big the waves are going to be impinging on the Leeward Islands, which are all these islands here in the Caribbean. Going forward, you can see the waves beginning to hit the islands, and that's 3 UTC on Saturday. And then as we go through, the progression of the highest waves moves up the island chain, eventually going towards Puerto Rico and then Hispaniola. And so all of these islands are going to be impinged by this huge surf, and it seems to last a long time and actually grows over time. So prolonged period of dangerous surf for these islands. Watch how the wave model shreds the surf in between the islands and produces all of these plumes of high surf coming through all the gaps. It's kind of neat. Here's the intensity guidance plot. Looks like the models are not really strengthening the storm beyond. It can't go beyond Cat 5, but it could become stronger. National Hurricane Center do suggest that it could become stronger, but the general consensus seems to be, at least according to this collection of models, for maintenance of a major hurricane throughout the 132 hours of the forecast, probably major hurricane throughout that whole period. That's pretty remarkable. For it to remain a major hurricane, it has to stay above and in the Cat 3 or above line there. In terms of the really long range, well, we've got the European Center model and we've got the GFS to look at, and they do not agree with one another. This is the European Center model, and down here is Hurricane Lee, and there's Margot over on the right to the east. Let's go forward. This is the 10th of September, with the storm passing north of the Leeward Islands, and the European Center model stalls the storm and then lifts it north, and then it actually just recurves before it reaches the eastern Canadian shore. What about the GFS? Well, the GFS takes a storm, curves it up, and it makes it a powerful and damaging landfall over Nova Scotia and into eastern Canada. Let's look at the timing. The timing of landfall in the GFS is September 16th. So, in conclusion, we don't know whether this will recurve and miss land or whether it will make landfall. The reason for the uncertainty is because of the jet stream, and specifically this trough that develops ahead of Lee, which is down here. This is going to pull the storm northwards, and depending on how much it pulls it northwards and how quickly, that will result in the storm taking just those very slightly different tracks. So we will have to check back and see how this trough develops and how it, in the future, how much it's going to pull the hurricane northwards. A couple of things to finish up with. Over in Greece, we've had these huge and terrible floods. I just checked the Landsat imagery and we could see mud plumes into the Aegean Sea along the eastern Greece shore. And I also did a comparison between before and after, as this Landsat imagery is from earlier today on the 8th of September. If we compare with the same imagery but from the 31st of August, you can see the extent of the flooding. The first and last of these comparisons are 70 kilometers across, so this is a huge area of land that is underwater from these floods. And I'll leave it at that. I'll leave you with this nice little tour over to Hurricane Lee from yesterday, and see you in the next one. Come join our Discord. It's awesome.